Thank you, thank you. All right, so today we're talking about building awesome sample apps. So a lot of us have developer communities. We want to reach out to developers. Developers like code, right? So there are a few different ways we like to provide that code. We might have official documentation that has code snippets in it. We might have blog posts with cookbooks in them. And some of us might be really organized, have nice GitHub repos with various code snippets in them. But when our developers start using these are all great, right? These are examples from my own company. But then developers start having other questions, right? Underlying questions after they look at these code snippets. So how do I apply this simple example to my bigger use case? Or how do I test this? Or how do I integrate this example into my app? And sometimes they have underlying questions that they might not even realize that they have that could be answered by sample code. So they might have questions like, how do I quickly build a complete application? Or how do I apply DevOps best practices? And your engineers at your company might be wondering, how do I know if I'm breaking something really important? And so when you start looking at these questions, sometimes that's where sample code breaks down, and you want to build a comprehensive sample application that covers a variety of use cases. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So my goal for this presentation is to empower you to convince your boss that building an awesome sample app should be at the top of your priority list. So when you walk out of here, I want you to feel Beyonce confident, ready to build your sample app. All right, so how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to start with a case study. I've been working on a sample app since last fall, so I'm going to talk to you about that. I'm going to pull out the concepts that I use, give you some steps to success, and then talk about some pitfalls I hit that hopefully you can avoid. So first, a little bit about me. I am a developer advocate for SugarCRM. I'm from Pennsylvania, which is on the East Coast of the United States. Before Sugar, I worked at IBM for a variety of different roles. I was a Java software engineer. I did some web development. I did growth hacking, and I've also done test automation. So I've hit the various pieces of the software development lifecycle, and now I'm here doing developer advocacy. Also, I'm really obsessed with Taylor Swift gifts. Okay, so let's talk about the case study. Just to give you a little background information about what I'm evangelizing. So I work on a product called Sugar. It's customer relationship management software. And one of the big selling points about Sugar is that it's highly customizable. So when you get a license to Sugar, you actually get access to our source code, which is awesome. You can go in, you can tinker, you can tweak, make it to be exactly what you want. The challenge here is that whatever you customize, you have to be able to upgrade in the future, right, to get our latest and greatest versions. So people customize, it creates problems. So that's the problem we want to solve. All right, so does anybody remember the Java Pet Store app from the early 2000s? Yes, okay. So I don't remember it, even though I'm a Java developer, but apparently it was all the rage. Basically, if you wanted to know how to build something in Java, you would go to this Java Pet Store application. So my chief product officer at Sugar was actually at Java when they built this Java Pet Store app. And so when I came to Sugar about a year ago, I kept hearing him ask, where is our pet store? Where is our pet store app? So that's what we set out to build. So we started out by talking about what our goals for our project were. So let's talk through those. First, we wanted it to be an authoritative example of how to customize the product in the best way. 2, we wanted it to be an example of how to follow DevOps best practices while customizing our product. So we've got a lot of end users that go ahead and customize our product, but we also have a lot of partners who bill by the hour, and they develop customizations for the end customers. So these partners don't always have time to create DevOps infrastructure and tooling, and so we wanted to make it really easy for them to create high quality customizations. And finally, we wanted this example to be an example that our engineers can test that they aren't breaking common customizations. All right, say that 5 times. Okay, so the next thing we did was we started brainstorming what our scenario should be. At the time, we were preparing for our annual user conference that had a superhero theme. So we decided to roll with that, and we ended up creating Professor M's School for Gifted Coders. Now, I'm not really into superheroes, but some people get the joke there. It's a university for superheroes. The next thing we did was identify the requirements for our minimum viable product, our MVP. Now, I don't really love meetings, but we had to do it. We got everybody together in a room. We brought in people from various parts of our organization, people from engineering, people from product services, people from customer support, and we said, hey, what do we need to cover in this example application? You know, what are the things that people trip up on, and what are the things that people do the most? We want to include those in our example. And then we also did some online research. We wanted to make sure we were using the best of breed tools, the latest and greatest. So we searched and saw, what are people using for their DevOps tools? What are they doing for continuous integration? Let's use those. So we created this big long list of requirements and broke it down. And here's what we came up with. So we came up with some basic customizations for the scenario, creating some custom modules, fields, and layouts. We decided we wanted some very basic test automation using PHP Unit and Jasmine because that's what our product engineering team uses. We wanted to create a DevOps pipeline using Travis CI. It's very popular and it's great because it's free and anyone can go in and look at it at any time. We wanted our tests integrated into the product's build process because we wanted to know instantly if anything that our product team created was going to break these common customizations. And finally, we decided to put our documentation into GitHub. So once we had all this lined up, it was time to actually do the work, right? Implement our MVP. So I'll show you what we created. If you're not familiar with Sugar, you're probably like, well, this looks normal, but it's actually a customized version of Sugar. If you look up on the top nav bar, we've got things like supergroups, professors, students, applicants. Those are all customized. We've got some custom sample data here that relates to our superhero theme. We did some very light testing using PHP Unit and Jasmine to get our infrastructure set up. We have a very simple DevOps pipeline using Travis CI. And we worked with our engineering automation team that runs our team's daily build processes and got our tests integrated into the daily build. So whenever an engineer merges their change set into master, our tests get run. So we'll know instantly if they break something. And the last thing we did was write some documentation. And we've been very intentional about this. We've got a lot of documentation because we wanted people to be able to come in and understand at any point the why behind the what. So we've talked about the scenario. We explain if you just want to come in and use the sample app, this is how you do it. Here's how you can check out our continuous integration. Here's how you can run our automated tests as part of continuous integration or manually on your computer. So we wanted people to be able to get up and running very easily. And then we've continued building incrementally. So here's another feature that we built. It's an application for this university. And we made sure that we built very transparently. So we do everything in GitHub. You can come in and see our issues at any time. And as I'm developing the code for this app, I've got a pull request. My manager reviews it. He's a very tough code reviewer. So at any point, anybody can come in and see, oh, this is why they made those changes. And with each new feature, we create a new doc in GitHub. So we explain what the feature is, why we decided to implement it that way, and then the details of the feature. If we had to add new database fields or whatever we had to do to implement it, we link to the official documentation so that people can pull out those concepts that we used to design that feature and apply them to their own. Another decision we made was to go ahead and implement continuous integration in Jenkins in addition to Travis CI. Now, a real project wouldn't need that, but because both tools are so popular, we wanted to provide that so people could choose which one they wanted. We also created our sample data using Postman. We've got a nice API that allows you to insert data into our platform. So we've got a Postman collection. It's our collection of API calls, and with every single API call, there's a simple test to make sure it worked. We've integrated those into our regular engineering build process as well, so we know instantly if something breaks our sample data. The next step we've been working on is something we're still in progress, engaging our engineers and developer community for help. So we have a quarterly release cycle for our products. We've run a webinar with that. So So every time we run a webinar, we're talking about what we've done in this example scenario. We explain the features, how it works, and encourage people to get involved. We write blog posts about new features. And then we've also chosen to use the ZenHub integration with GitHub. And what I really like about this is that anybody can come in and easily see what's in progress, what's just been closed. If you want to come in and pull out something from the top of our backlog, you can. So we're trying to be very transparent and have an easy onboarding process. We had one pull request, which we celebrated. We've got some outside participation coming in. And the last step is measuring success. And we've had a couple of sessions that have talked about measuring success today. And it's kind of a hazy subject, right? So the first thing we did was look at our goals and say, how can we measure these? So our first goal was to be an authoritative example on how to customize the product. So we've got 4 features implemented, hoping to get more soon. The second goal was to be an example of DevOps best practices. And I know DevOps is more than tooling, right? It's people and processes. But we have some tooling set up. We've got automated tests. We've got continuous integration. And our third goal was to be an example that our product team could use to check and see if they're breaking something. And we actually found a bug. So that was pretty exciting. It's working. We started looking at the GitHub stats, and these are a little hazy, right? Like you can look and see who's watching, how many watches you have, how many stars you have. You can see Git clones for the last 2 weeks. But if this is something we want to measure, we're going to have to build up a little more infrastructure to pull out the data there. All right, so I kind of talked through what we've been doing since last fall, but I want to talk about you guys. How can we apply this to your projects? How can we empower you to do this on your own? So step 1, identify project goals. So some of you guys are working on platforms like I am. Maybe some of you are working on APIs or SDKs. Some of you are developer tools. So let's kind of talk through what that might look like. So maybe you want to be an authoritative example of how to use your tools when building a project. Maybe you want to be an example of how to follow DevOps best practices while utilizing your APIs. Maybe you want to be an example that your engineers can use to test they aren't breaking common API uses. So you're going to have a variety of goals here, but those are just some ideas to get you started. Next, create the scenario. So get people together, talk about what a good scenario for your use case would be. Consider what are common uses. You want to make sure that your scenario is big enough to cover all those common uses. Step 3 is to identify the requirements for your minimum viable product. So what features do you want to hit? What sort of tests do you want to have? Is it automated? Is it manual? Do you want to build up infrastructure, continuous integration? And how do you want to document it? We chose to do all of our documentation in GitHub, but you might have a developer portal, or maybe you want to send out notifications in newsletters, that sort of thing. Next, get busy, implement your minimum viable product, and then continue building incrementally. So if you haven't already identified the roles of who's going to be working on your project, you might want to do that. So who's going to be your product owner and prioritize your backlog? Who are going to be your developers? Is it just your developer advocacy team? Is it everybody in the company? Is it your whole developer community? Who's going to be involved? And then build infrastructure as necessary. The next thing you want to do is engage your engineers and developer community for help. Something that's really tricky is to get manager buy-in. If you want your engineers at your company to come help you, you've got to get manager buy-in. They need to have the space to be able to work on it, and it probably needs to be tied to their performance review if they're going to actually get involved. And also encourage external participation at all levels. Some people might only be comfortable coming in and writing a bug report, right? Some people, if you have a bug report, maybe they'll come in and fix it. And then there are people who are going to jump right in and actually implement features, but you want to make sure you're encouraging participation at all those levels. And finally, measure success. So identify what metrics matter to your stakeholders. If your stakeholders don't care if they're going to let you continue on with the project no matter what your metrics look like, don't spend a lot of time stressing about it, right? But if your project's not going to continue, figure out what those important metrics are. You might need to build metrics infrastructure if necessary. We talked about GitHub's a little, they only give you 2 weeks of data, right? So you might need to write some code that's going to pull that data out for you and put it in a database. And then be sure to gather informal feedback as well. If people are using it, you can send out surveys. If people talk to you and say, oh, that was so helpful, it kept me from scratching my head for 3 hours, write that down and document that so you have that for your manager. All right, so last big thing I want to talk about today are 3 pitfalls that I hit that hopefully you can avoid. So not having coding standards. When you don't have coding standards, it can be the Wild West, right? Not only can your code get messy, what I've found is that people end up bickering over coding standards in pull requests, which is super frustrating, right? You want people focused on the big concepts, making sure that you're applying your concepts correctly, not over on which line a bracket goes on. The second thing is that developers in your company probably don't care about the success of your app, right? Unless you've got manager buy-in and your developers have space to work on it, they don't care. And the final pitfall is failing to engage your developer community. And there are a variety of ways you can do this. If you have a slow pull request response time, people forget what they were working on. They don't have time to work on it anymore. So you want to make sure you're getting back to your pull requests very quickly. If you have unclear requirements, people aren't going to be able to jump in. If you have uninteresting problems, people don't want to jump in. And if you don't have incentives, people aren't going to join you. So there have been talks today about how you should incentivize people to work on your projects. But that can be as simple as maybe in your monthly newsletter you talk about your top contributors. Maybe you mention them in your webinar. Or maybe you send them a t-shirt, stickers. There are different ways you can do it, but make sure that you're recognizing those people who are participating in your project. All right, so let's recap. For people who like to take pictures, I made this for you. So, why build a sample app instead of separate sample code snippets? Okay, they solve bigger problems. They show how to build a complete solution. They demonstrate best practices related to development and tooling. And they provide a testing resource for your product. You got it. All right. All right. And then how do you successfully build an awesome sample app that actually provides value? So these are the 7 steps we've been talking about. Identify project goals, create the scenario, identify the requirements for the minimum viable product, implement it, continue building incrementally in a transparent way, engage your engineers and developer community for help, and measure success. All right, so hopefully we've achieved today's goal. You're feeling Beyonce confident. You're ready to go out and build your sample app. If you want to follow up, you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I've also provided links to our sample app so you can check it out, as well as our developer blog. The slides for today are linked on my Twitter if you want to take a look at those as well. And that is all I have. Thank you.